Hello and welcome to our session today. As a special feature, you can see me from the side today because the camera that I actually brought for the stream does not work. It worked the whole day, but now when it's prime time, of course, it doesn't. I'm very happy because today we will be able to stream not only to YouTube, but also to Periscope and to Twitch. I finally found a sponsor, my company, MSG. See if I can bring up the logo. Yeah, there it is. And yeah, to do something for them, I'm gonna tell you a bit about MSG. They are a software development company, so if you need help with software development, but also with bringing your stuff to the cloud, SAP and whatnot, they can help you. They are present in a lot of companies around a lot of countries around the world. So go check out their webpage. It's www.msg.group. If you need anything in the software area, they can probably help you there. They're also hiring. So if you are a developer looking for a job, you can go to career.msg.group and maybe there's something that you like. Also, if there's no job description that fits you right there, feel free to apply and maybe there's some opening. All right, and also I want to thank JetBrains who are sponsoring us with IDE licenses. So at the end of the stream, I will give away a voucher for an IDE license. You can see on their webpage. My favorite is probably Rider, but maybe you're a PyCharm guy or girl. So if you win this raffle, then you can choose from one of their IDEs. Well, I've been talking a lot already, so I guess it's time to introduce the main sensation, which is Allan. Allan, I'm very happy to have you.
Thanks for inviting me.
How do you do today?
It's pretty good. It's early where I am. I'm in Toronto, Canada, so it's 8 a.m. my time. A little early, but I can, I got enough coffee in my system. I'll do this well for you guys.
Perfect. Well, I'll let you get right to it. Should I already bring up your slides? You want to talk about the slides?
I got the slides going. I promise there'll only be a little bit of PowerPoint, but Shiny obviously covers quite a bit of stuff. So I got to do just an intro to it and a walkthrough of kind of like what's involved in it and what it does. And then I'll do some quick code examples. If anybody has any questions during it, just post in the chat, and I'm happy to answer those as we go. So my name's Allan Ritchie. I'm a Microsoft MVP, a former Xamarin MVP when that was a thing. I've been doing .NET pretty much since the beginning, since the 1.0 betas back in the very early 2000, actually. I do lots of OSS. You might have used some of my stuff. If so, I apologize. I've done ACR user dialogues. I've done a BLE plugin and geofencing. Those are some of the big ones I've done. You can find me on Twitter or GitHub, however you need to reach me. And I have a typo in this. So right to it. What is Shiny? Well, the napkin sales pitch is it's basically a library or a framework, more so, to help you with your device-centric and background-centric services. It brings in things like dependency injection and logging, and really gives you a consistent way to do things in the background or with the device in a cross-platform way, using our standard C# code. Like I said, if you're an ASP.NET core developer, a lot of what I'll show today should be very comfortable. It should seem very familiar to you. Things like startup patterns and kind of the Microsoft extensions, dependency injection. It's all there, so it'll look familiar. Some of the modules, I'm not going to cover them all today because some of them, could be like 3 or 4 of these talks. I will show some periodic jobs today, but Shiny does cover a lot of things like Bluetooth LE, location-centric services like GPS, geofencing, and other things like that. There's local notifications, push notifications, etc. Some of that I'll cover in the next slide. So again, what is Shiny? It's a cross-platform foundation to build on. Provides a way for you to write modular and testable code while supporting the needed infrastructure. If you've used plugins over the years for Xamarin, you always know that you need kind of like a mix and match. So you'll need like James Montemango's permissions and maybe top activity. You might be pulling in like user dialogues, maybe some geofencing. And you kind of end up with this mismatch of stuff that while it works good, you end up with a lot of duplicated code between them because they all end up needing some little pieces of each other in order to get them to work. And the other thing I found as I was writing a lot of these plugins, so like notifications, is you always needed some sort of persistence or storage engine. You always needed something like a permissions check or top activity. Like it always became the same thing for every plugin. So you were duplicating a lot of this code, or you were having a ton of dependencies that could break at any time. And the other thing that I noticed with a lot of these plugins is that they didn't support testability very easily. They didn't support like dependency injection or they didn't have built-in logging. So there was a lot of things missing. And really, there was no consistent way of using these plugins other than kind of your standard init stuff. So when I set out to do Shiny, I wanted something like Prism, but for the background and device-centric services. Shiny is built for Android and iOS primarily. I do support UWP because there are quite a few developers out there using UWP. For those that have been following Microsoft for the last, I guess, year, they're working on WinUI 3, so I'm not really sure what that means for UWP right now, but I'll continue to support it for until the next iteration of Windows development comes out. So again, what it solves, like I said, I saw every app suffer from some sort of mismatch of plugins, lack of testing. Backgrounding would often fail. Like if you did geofencing on Android, people would hook the events too late and miss the geofencing event. So it was just the constant problems of plugins not really forcing you to do things the right way to make them work out of the box. And it was continual problems for that. Even when I did see backgrounding done, right, it was more of a hack how people were getting things to work. And it was unfortunate because really these hacks, they make your apps hard to deal with as future goes on. There was always problems with the infrastructure that you needed to bring for cross-platform. You'd always need some sort of workflow engine from Android, alarms, all that stuff. Shiny brings all of that. So you don't even have to worry about permissions in a vast majority of things. It handles all of that because it's just like Xamarin Essentials. Probably everybody here is using Xamarin Essentials. It covers a lot of those cases, and there is a lot of overlap with Shiny. I'm slowly kind of eroding that away and letting Essentials do a lot of it. But under the hood, Shiny does have all of these things because it needs them in order to get its own infrastructure rolling. But Xamarin Essentials as a whole, well, it's great. It's all static-based, and it doesn't really lend itself to testability. For a lot of us enterprise developers or those developing large mobile apps, you really need that testing because as you're introducing new features, breaking stuff is you don't want to be breaking stuff as you're rolling new things in. Also, Essentials is really good at handling kind of the essential APIs. I don't want to say easier or smaller stuff, but stuff that you need every day. Just very easy to use APIs, nothing big. nothing that requires a lot of boilerplate. But this is where Shiny tends to differ, and I attack different points with Shiny is APIs like push and push notifications and things like BLE. They're quite large in size, so it's got all of those hooks, and it's really designed to handle those big APIs that we use that aren't really as essential. The other thing that Shiny sets out to fix, if you've done a lot of Android code, I know every major release of Android, you don't know, am I working with broadcast receivers today? Am I working with services? Am I working with foreground services? I never know. You always have to be updating with every Android release. So the goal was to actually just solve this. If I solve it in one place as an API changes, I roll out a new NuGet, and all of a sudden, all of my customers would benefit from this update, and I wouldn't have to go through and change everything and change all the broadcast receivers and services and registration. It just will work. So that was one of the goals I really wanted to solve with Shiny, was dealing with this Android cruft of stuff that always comes up. Uh-oh, lost my mouse. So in a few minutes, I'm going to show some code. Like I said, it'll look fairly familiar. It does have its own kind of boilerplate and app startup stuff because it needs it. And I'll show why. I'll show what we're doing there. Logging is built in from the start. A lot of people don't. I was seeing this constantly too. A lot of people not building in logging. They would usually just register something like App Center and hope that it would catch all their crashes, but that's not generally enough. You really need to see what's going on under the hood. And when you're working in the background, App Center isn't always the best at dealing with those and logging them. It's got to be a secondary logging as opposed to your primary kind of view portal. So Microsoft Extensions logging is built in throughout Shiny. If you have a background service that you have some sort of code that's not fully tested, if it crashes, I will log it for you, so that you're never kind of left in the dark as to why things aren't running. Again, dependency injection through and through, because it supports the testability. But I will show for those that do like static and they do like kind of the way that Essentials does things, I'll show you something today that Shiny does to kind of make that easy. This is kind of a controversial thing, and I know some people don't like it, but it's a hill I'm willing to die on. I don't use .NET events. They tend to leak memory. They're very strong referenced. They can cause a lot of problems. So a lot of Shiny, especially when you go into BLE, is all reactive extensions. It lends itself to a very powerful API. A lot of people will think RX is complicated. And what I tell them is don't confuse complexity with power. So it's there. You can still use async and await with RX. It's very easy to work with once you learn that paradigm. So don't fear it, embrace it. For background stuff, I'm going to show something that we do. We don't use .NET events, obviously, and we don't necessarily use RX events either. For the background, we have to use something like delegates. So if you've done a lot of iOS development, you'll register a delegate for your GPS and stuff like that. There's a reason that I embrace that for Shiny, and it's partially because of the dependency injection, but it's also it's a model that allows me to rehydrate a class with your services, and also support dependency injection and testability there as well. So I'm going to show a little bit of that today as we go through the code.
We already have a question.
Okay.
If I may interrupt you.
Yeah,
Marian is asking, can I use Shiny with my own IOC like Unity?
Yes, you can. I'm not really sure what's involved with getting Unity in, but I use the Microsoft dependency injection extensions on purpose. First of all, because it's just supported by Microsoft, and it's actually out of the box. It's a very fast DI engine. But if you do like Unity, I believe the Microsoft extensions has a plugin so you can roll Unity into them. And
Marian doesn't stop there. He also wanted to know if Shiny supports beacons for iOS and Android.
If it supports what?
Beacons.
Beacons. I do support beacons. I will talk about actually right now. I'm just going to go through some of the modules really quickly. Anybody else?
No, that's it for now.
Okay. So again, some of the quick modules. I'm going to show periodic background jobs momentarily. Background GPS and geofencing is all there in a package, along with motion activity. Motion activity recognition is something like tracking runs, walking, biking, driving. It's a pretty cool module. It's part of the locations package simply because that's where Android seemed to put it. I don't know why, but it's part of the location package just because of Android. Shiny has local notifications scheduled. They can customize them pretty much any way the OS supports. It has channeling, action support, the whole 9 yards. A lot of people ask why I have local notifications in Shiny. It's simply as I was writing these services, every time I'd write a service, I always found a need to have local notifications. So if you did something in the background and you wanted to let the user know, hey, we synced all your photos from this job to your server, it's now done. Here's a local notification to let them know. So I found I was using them everywhere, so why not roll them into Shiny? And plus, this is a plugin I used to have many years ago, and it was much easier to maintain in Shiny, so I brought that one forward. Push notifications. This came as a request from a good friend of mine, Dan Siegel of Prism. I'm sure a lot of people in here use Prism. I call him my second wife. He tends to nag me for these things, but he had a really good point. He was switching between App Center when they have push notifications. And if you've used any of the push notification providers out there, I can't even think of all of them that exist today. But they kind of drop like flies if you've ever used them. I think one of the last ones that I can think of that's not Microsoft or Google is OneSignal. And it pretty much builds on the native providers anyways. So really what the problem was is that you'd roll these notifications or these push notification services, and then they would die. And you'd have to go and swap out all that code everywhere just to get new notifications working. So really what I wanted to do was set out so that we could change between our notification providers with one single line of code in our startup file. So I'm going to show a little bit of that today as well, so people can kind of see the things that we're working on there and see that we can work with push notifications in a consistent manner and change the providers very easily at the drop of a hat in our mobile applications. Also, the one other thing there is that a lot of people want to work with a push notification. Say you've got a chat app. They want to work with those in the foreground. And for some reason, I see a lot of people have challenges with that. So there's ways to work with this in the foreground as well as push notifications roll through. And I'll try to show that as well. And to answer the question that came up in the chat, I do indeed support iBeacons. There is a package for beacons. For iOS, it uses the native iBeacon library, so it works quite well. For stuff like Android and UWP, it's actually quite cool. Instead of working off of a binding library like, I can't even think of one of the native libraries right now, Alt Beacons, I decided to roll it fresh, all C# native, so that the beacon plugin is 100% C# off of the BLE library. And it does the monitoring in the background. It does ranging. So it does all the standard beacon stuff that you'd expect. Hopefully that answers the question. All right. I promised I wouldn't do all slides because I know what us developers think of PowerPoint. So I wanted to just quickly roll a standard app. So the first thing I want to show is Shiny and Xamarin Forms and Essentials. They all have these complicated, how do I say it, boilerplate code. So if you look right now at my app delegate, you'll notice there's really no code. There's zero code. There is this little attribute, which I'll show in a second what that guy's going to do. And same for activities. We're looking at this. Again, no code, just a partial class. So with .NET 5, I don't even know if it was really just .NET 5. It's just when they released something called code generators or source generators. What I was able to do, and I found that a majority of my bugs coming into Shiny were always missing boilerplate code because there's a lot of it. You need to wire to new intent, you need permission wiring, you need all that stuff that comes just to get your app running. And I know, like Essentials, like I said, they had problems with it. Forms has problems with it. So I wanted to make that easy. So by marking my activity as partial and marking this little attribute saying what my startup type is and what my Xamarin Forms app is, I'm able to wire all of that. So you can take a look. I'm just going to show kind of what that wires. So here's our Android activity that gets built for us. So as you can see, this was all done at runtime. Or at build time. It's even saying this is auto-generated, so you can't edit it. But basically what happens is my source generators for Shiny, they go search through all of your code and all your NuGets that are referenced. It sees that Essentials, you know, I've referenced Essentials in my NuGet packages right there. It decided to wire up Essentials for you. It wired in all the Shiny calls that it needs. So there's the Shiny calls. And I even attacked some of the third-party libraries as well. So like if you use Microsoft Authentication Library or in this case, XF Material, I love that library. Shout out to the maintainers that do that one. I take a look at that and I wire it in as well. And then obviously the Xamarin Forms stuff is here as well. So you basically don't need to do anything. Your activity is empty. There is ways to customize it if you've got other third-party libraries that maybe I don't know about. You can wire them up separately. There'll be links to the documentation how to do that after. And again, if you don't even like build source generators, you can manually wire all this stuff yourself to Shiny or to your third party. You don't need the source generation stuff. So you could negate this and just do your normal class initialization stuff. And one other thing, let's show off. There's also Shiny in order to get running, because the main activity may never launch on Android. We have to spin an actual Android application class. So Shiny will generate this as well. This is something that it absolutely needs because broadcast receivers and services launch before your main activity. And again, if it's in the background, your main activity, often isn't even going to launch. And here again, I'm spinning up Essentials for you and the Shiny stuff. So you don't even get to see this class. This is generated automatically for you. You don't even know it's there. And again, you can see it in the generations there. And then very quickly, let's go to, what am I looking at here? iOS, references, analyzers. Here's the iOS equivalent. And there's all of our iOS generated code. Again, here it is here. This is your standard stuff. Here is the actual generated code. So it went and saw, okay, you're using a Shiny push notification library. It's referenced in our shared stuff right there. It said, okay, well, a Shiny push notification library is registered. I'm going to go ahead and wire those events. I see you've got background jobs, which is pretty much standard anyways. I'm going to wire that call in. And then there's also this handle events for background transfers. Again, that's another library, another plugin of Shiny that does background uploads and downloads. So it saw that that's there. And the reason it generates these dynamically, if you've ever submitted to the App Store, they tend to complain if you don't have a push notification library and you register all this stuff, they're like, nope, we don't want that junk. Get it out of here. So it generates all these methods dynamically for you. So, and that's all new to 2.0, Shiny 2.0. All right. So now that we've seen kind of the basic boilerplate that needs to get going, basically everything in Shiny runs through this startup file. So our app delegate was registering our startup file. This should look fairly familiar for those coming from ASP.NET Core. Just kind of your standard startup with the configure services that gives you a service collection. So this is where you'll register all your infrastructure, your services, So say you've got your own custom services, like a data service or an HTTP service, you would register them here. And this way, Shiny can access that infrastructure that you have throughout your background services. And for this demo, I'm going to just kind of quickly show what a background job is in Shiny. Background jobs are a really good way of, say you've got data you want to pull from the server, every 15 to 20 minutes, and you only want to pull it if there's internet available. So there's a lot of filters you can do on these background jobs. So for instance, if you want to run it when it's charging, if your device is charging, you can set filters like that. I personally have never used this one. I've tested it, but I haven't used it. You can also tell it not to run your jobs if the battery's low on the device. Maybe you don't want to kill the last of the juice on the battery for your user. That's there. And again, if you don't want it to run, if there's not any internet, you can filter. You can say it requires some form of internet. And you can also say if it's a big background transfer, you can say, I only want metered or unmetered connections. And we're also going to register local notifications because I'm going to use that in my test job in a minute. And last but not least, the logging setup here. I have added App Center and Firebase logging extensions for the Microsoft framework because, again, a lot of us mobile developers are using, there's one Signal. There's some other big providers out there that are kind of doing Crashlytics and analytics for your apps, but I've added Firebase and App Center to the Microsoft extensions to at least get us moving here. All right, so let's do a job. So this is my background job that I registered in my startup. It doesn't do much right now. It doesn't look like much. Obviously, there's some of the info about your job coming in here if you need to see it in your job. These are periodic. So what I tell people is that it's not going to run on a schedule. It's going to run very intelligently by your OS. So if you're hoping for something that's going to run at a consistent time frame, this is not going to happen. The OS is very conscious of your user, trying to make sure that you're not killing their battery, and running at appropriate times. It's also going to make sure of things like, is the filters being respected, stuff like that. And the other thing that you need to be careful of here is that you've got about 30 seconds to roll any code here. This is not an infinite time space to run. It's like a time slice. So don't spin up any timers. Don't try and do anything that's going to run for like 15 minutes because it's just not going to happen, especially on iOS. iOS is really going to time limit you to that 30 seconds, and then it's going to trim this on you. So there is a cancellation token passed in. It's going to call for the cancellations just before your job's about to die. So to let you know you need to finish what you're doing. You can choose to respect it. I think for most cases, I generally tend to ignore it. Run what you can and then try some more later. Things like the job info do have when it was last run. So you can see when the job was last run if you want to continue synchronizing data from that point onwards. So this job isn't doing very much yet. And the question usually comes up, well, how do I get my infrastructure to this now? Well, again, if we wired all of this stuff into our Shiny startup, and again, I'm going to show notifications here because that's a great one. So because we're using dependency injection out of the box, I'm able to get things like notifications, and I'm going to reference that. I'm able to just wire them in through the dependency injection constructor, and off we go. So I'm going to reference this guy, or I'm going to store a reference to it. All right, so there we have it. We have our local notification. And we're just going to say, let's give it a title. We'll say hi. And we'll say this is a test message. Okay, not much to it. It's very simple what it's going to do. And again, this is going to run on Android. You can guess 15 to 20 minutes on average. iOS is going to run this. Depends on when your user is using their phone most of the day. So if you're, for instance, I used to take the train downtown every morning, and then on my way home, it knew to run these jobs quite intelligently. So as I take the train, there's several places where the internet would cut off. iOS was so intelligent, it knew when I was going to lose internet most of the time, and knew to run these jobs. It's incredibly intelligent how it does it. But there's no set theorem as to when it's going to do it. You don't really get a say. So there's our job. Now, the one thing we have to do is ask the OS and our user for permission. So here I've got a basic Xamarin Forms page. It does run all the jobs. And for anybody that knows me, they know I'm not big on UI. So this is just a quick, dirty sample to show us kind of what's going on. And in the on-click event here, I'm doing the Shiny resolve. Think of this as like your Xamarin Forms dependency service. Now, I have my own Shiny host because obviously I don't take dependencies on Xamarin Forms. So Shiny works with straight Xamarin if for anybody that's doing that. And it does work with forms as well as needed. So with notifications, we need to ask our user for permission in order to show it. On Android, there's not really much of a permission to show notifications, but on iOS, there absolutely is. So this gives you back a flag to tell, did the user grant me permissions? You can see it here. And then obviously, if it's available, we're good to go. I'm not going to do anything with it here right now for the purposes of the demo, because I'm going to say yes. But it's just something you should be prepared of, because there are users that'll say, no, don't bother me. And what I'm showing here, now I'm showing the job manager. I'm basically resolving how I'm going to work with jobs manually. This isn't something you really need to do very often. Jobs are basically granted out of the box, but there is a request permission for it as well. But here I'm basically just going to run all jobs that are registered with the system. I'm basically registering my jobs through startup. And this is generally what I tell people to do, is register them at your start of your app. You can register them dynamically with the job manager here, but that's very advanced cases. So stick to startup where you can. So basically here, I know I'm only going to have one job, so I'm kind of cheating this. I'm going to resolve the first result that comes out of it. But if you had maybe 2 or more jobs, this would give you an array of what returned. And again, this is manually running your jobs. These will still run in the background. And I'm going to show an example how to test a background job. But generally what I tell people is if your job is running here successfully, it's going to run in the background fine, because we manage that. So we've got our permission checks. We've got our dependencies set up. We've got notifications. We've got our registered job. I do have App Center here. Obviously, this isn't wired because I don't have an App Center secret for the purposes of a demo, but it's here just to show you how to wire in logging as needed. So let's go ahead and run this and hope that the Android emulator spins up without any issues. It's always something. There we go. Okay, so we're up and running. Here's our ugly UI. Again, a lot of the Xamarin Forms developers out there, we try to make this pretty. For demos, I make these as ugly as humanly possible. Hence why I've chosen a black background with a red text button. So let's go ahead and run this. Now you can see, yay, we've run our job. So I did that in the foreground. It was successful. And here's our notification. Now there was 2 because it ran on the startup, but let's do that again. And there we go. Boom. So that's a very simple way. Now, if you wanted to test the full workflow to see if it's working in the background, there's ways to do this in the command line for Android. I'm not going to cover that today, but it will be in the documentation in the future, how to do that. But you can assume if it's running here, it's going to run in the background just fine. Now, Android or iOS is a little bit more of a closet case for how these things run and work. So I'm going to show very quickly. I'm going to bring up my Mac here. Hopefully everybody can see that fine. So I've already got the same code running over here. And I'm basically I've got my same app. Where's the app here? So there's our same ugly app. I can run it here. Notifications work just fine. But really, we want to see how this runs as if the app was cold. So the reason I run this on the Mac is the Mac has this very nice feature for being able to simulate an iOS background fetch. So as you can see, I've backgrounded the app. So now I want to see this thing run right in the background. So I'm able to actually test the code. This will debug. Bang, and we hit our debug point here. So you're testing an actual background fetch from iOS as if your app was cold. So this is a very good way to kind of make sure your infrastructure is working as needed. Something else I wanted to show here really quickly is that you can see logging is built in. You can inject a logger to your job if you needed. So maybe you want to track some analytics or some phases as you went through things in your job. But you don't need to do stuff like a try catch here. Oh, you can see it just shut down my job because I waited longer than 30 seconds too. So I had my breakpoint there and iOS said you're done. But as I was saying, you can inject a logger here for analytical data, but you don't need to catch your crashes. So one of the things that Shiny does is it's wrapped all of these jobs that run in its own try catch. So if for whatever reason your job crashes, Shiny's built heavily to deal with these things because if it crashes in the background, you may not know. And I really wanted to make sure that users, if they did forget their try catch, they really know what's going on. So if you had App Center wired in and you didn't have a try catch in your job, or maybe the notification was busted somehow, I will log that to your loggers as necessary. You don't need to try catch your job on your own. All right. Let's turn this guy off. If I can see reflector. Hang on. Let's put this big ugly button over my screen so now I can't see it. There we go. All right. Is there any questions on jobs? Any questions at all?
We had another question about source generators, but I think you already answered that the source generation is optional.
Yep.
And we had one more from Marian. Is there needed any cloud for the push notifications like Azure to use PN from Android, iOS, UWP? I guess yes. But
yep. Basically, I'm going to show push notifications really quick now, just kind of the basic wiring for Shiny. But I'm only handling the mobile side. I'm not handling, obviously, the server side. But Shiny push notifications out of the box. I have various plugins for native if you're rolling your own. And really native is, I mean, even all these push providers, they basically run on native iOS and Firebase under the hood. Those are really the push providers that you have. But I have other plugins for Azure Notification Hubs, Firebase for Android and iOS, if you're a Firebase lover. I have OneSignal. AWS is being considered right now. So I'm basically trying to cover as many of the push notification providers as possible so that we can swap out our code at will. So we don't need to really worry about these things. Now, I'm not going to do a demo of the actual push notification here because there's a lot of, obviously, OS setup that comes with that. But I wanted to show very quickly how we wire these things and kind of the advantages that there are to working with Shiny and push notifications. So let's show the delegate. I'm going to show the delegate very quickly. What the delegate is here is these are the events that are going to fire in the background for your push notifications. So for instance, if your push notification token changes, this is more privy to something like Firebase, as the Firebase token can change over time. Maybe you wanted to do some dependency injection for your backend service to let it know, hey, user one, their push notification token now, if you want to get in touch with just them in the future, it's now this. These other two events, the on received is the big guy. This is where you're actually getting a notification from the server. And again, this is all cross-platform, so you don't need to worry about Android or iOS or any of that stuff. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's in this. So there is your notification data if you sent any. If you sent like a silent push for those who've done push notifications, this is often null. So you won't get your badge or your channel or the ID or any of that stuff. But it is there. Just check it for null if it came in. But really the stuff that people are after is this. This is the data. This is a read-only dictionary of strings. So if you sent something like go to server, value is true, or go to server as of this date, all of that data that you send in your notification will be here. And this is really the gold. This is the stuff that we're generally after when we're doing push notifications for data processing anyways. It could also be as simple as maybe you don't even care about the notifications. Maybe the fact that it's running is enough to say, go off to our server and pull data because it's told us there is data involved now. So you wouldn't send a lot of data through your push notification, but what you may do is give your app a kick to say, go and get data. So try to be careful what you do here in terms of what you send through the notification. And again, here you've got roughly 25 to 30 seconds, depending on the platform, to do some processing. And last but not least, this on entry. This is basically just when your user taps on your notification. You may have like a text entry. So say it was a chat app. You can see stuff like that in the response here. You can also see if they're saying yes or no. So say you wanted to do like a, hey, Alan, there's this job available. Do you accept or reject? You could process them all here in the on entry. So that's our delegate. Let's see how we can wire this guy up, because really that's the gold of Shiny is these things all work consistently with every provider we have, whether it's Azure notification hubs or native. So that's pretty much done. That's what we want to, that's what we're going to work with. Let's go ahead and see how we register these guys. So if you're rolling your own kind of backend for native push notifications, we just use use push, and we register with our push delegate, and that's it. I'll show the permissions check in 1 second, but really this is how we're wiring to our native. If tomorrow we go, you know what, we want to roll this out of Azure. Kind of one of the benefits to using Azure Notifications Hubs is they're very good at treating it as cross-platform in terms of how you're pushing to either iOS or Android. And they also add a lot of things. So if you've done native iOS notifications, they don't come with things like tags and a lot of the rich things that we need out of notifications, like iOS tagging or iOS push notifications are bare bones. So using Azure Notification Hubs is beneficial here. So if I wanted to use Azure Notification Hubs, again, I've pulled the package in. It is right there. I don't have a magnifying glass, so hopefully everybody can see that. So I'm going to take out my standard push, and I'm going to say use Azure Notification Hubs. I'm going to register the same push delegate. And obviously for Azure Notification Hubs, I need two other things. I need my listener connection string, and I need the hub name that I want to register against. And that's it. And now we would be using Azure Notification Hubs just like that. One line of code to switch. And last but not least, let's go back to our service here. And I'm going to resolve our push manager. So there's one other thing, obviously, like we had to do with our notifications. We have to ask for permission to use push. So I'm going to go ahead and resolve the push, and I'm going to request access. Let's reuse our access variable here. Oh, we can't. This is push. Push has a slightly different look to it, and I'll show why. So for push access here, we have a registration token. So this is important if you want to be able to know what your user, what to actually get a hold of your individual user. You may have your user ID, so you want to say, user Alan, this is his push notification token. whether it's with Azure notification hubs or the native, this is what it's going to be. This is how you talk to them. And then there's the status here as well, because there could be a reason. Maybe they declined, they don't want push notifications, etc. You can check all of that here. And last but not least, the other things I just wanted to show quickly for push notifications is, like I said, tags may be supported with your provider. It's really only iOS native that doesn't support tagging, but most of the others do. There's a lot of stuff like try add tag. So if the provider supports it, it'll tag the item with the appropriate service. You can clear the tags. You can try and get the tags if they're there. This is all stuff that if it's supported, it'll run the stuff that you need. And as I was mentioning earlier, if people wanted to work with push notifications in the foreground, so if this was a chat app, maybe I'm on my chat screen. As these notifications roll through, I want to work with them right here. So I don't even care about the delegate as much. I care about what is running on the actual screen. Shiny has a when received. So this is an observable, again, RX based. Again, learn to like it. They are quite powerful. So when it's received, I want to subscribe on the main thread. I'll just do subscribe now. I'll just do subscribe. Subscribe on main thread is actually something else. So we're going to get our notification here, our push notification. And one thing you should do is make sure you actually run this on the main thread using Xamarin Forms, or if for any RX users that are out there, Reactive UI has a thing to put this on the main thread, because this is going to fire on the background. So I'm just going to look really quickly at what's in here. This is just like our delegate that we had. It's a push notification coming in. Let me reference one other thing here. We get our notification here in the subscribe, and we can do stuff like maybe we want to push this out to our screen. If it contains key message, maybe we want to write that out to the screen somehow. Whatever you may do, maybe you want to put an alert in their face. This is kind of the things you can do in the foreground with a notification. So that's quite a bit to throw at you, but that's there. I will put this code up on a GitHub repo for people to kind of process and look at later, just if there's any questions around that.
We have a couple of questions.
Sure.
One is from Almir. Is push notification generated every time the app is running closed in the background?
Yep, it will run this push delegate. So the delegates are designed for the background processing. So kind of what I was showing in the foreground, this is the equivalent event in the background. So if your app is cold or in the background running on maybe you're running another app, this guy will fire when your application receives a notification. And then that way you can do whatever data processing you're going to do. If your app is in the background on iOS and you want this event to run, you do have to tell it that content is available. Otherwise, it will just send the notification data because it doesn't figure your app needs to know about the notification if you're just sending kind of pure notification, like an actual notification data for your user. So make sure you set content available in your push notification. Does that answer?
Also, I think Alma was asking, he wrote asking this because some of the libraries provide the event when notification is received in foreground, but we still need to generate the notification to be visible.
I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what I'm answering with that question. Maybe we can cover that offline. Send me a message on Twitter, and I can try and figure out what you're doing there.
Okay. Also, Marian is asking, is it possible to send push notifications? I think he's probably thinking about the chat or something like that.
No. And the reason I didn't do that is because it's really only a Firebase thing that allows you to kind of send messages back through the server. So I didn't really want to get too in depth with that. yet. I am considering it for a future release, potentially. The problem is when you get into being able to send push notifications back through the server, there's a lot of additional security that comes there. So I didn't really want to deal with that out of the gate because, again, it's a very specific use case for Firebase.
No more questions, only appreciation. I'm going to say thank you, Allan. This is really looks great. Great tool to have with Xamarin Forms.
Awesome. So there's one other thing I wanted to show, and then I'll go to the last of my slides. Obviously, like I said, Xamarin Essentials is all static. So a lot of people just want to work with that. If you've got a smaller app and you don't want to worry about the testing, I know a lot of people want statics. The reason I don't do them out of the box or really out of the box is because having static classes where you're using interfaces everywhere, it's hard to make your static class obey your interfaces. So I didn't want to support static classes, or at least myself, because as interfaces evolved, you had to remember to change a static class. So I didn't want to do that. So what I did do was the next best thing. Again, going back to source generators. So in my shared code here, we have this assembly info. Here's our XAML compilation that probably people are quite familiar with for those that do Xamarin Forms apps. But you'll notice I've got this other attribute here called generate static classes. It's part of the Shiny namespace. And I've given it a namespace of just app1 for now. So what this is going to do at build time is it's actually going to go and generate, because it sees that, okay, you want me to generate all static classes? Here we go. So here is basically what it's done. The Shiny source generator has gone through and said, okay, for every Shiny NuGet package that I know of, go through all the classes and generate their static equivalents for our users to use. So I showed off the job interface here. So here is the job Shiny class. There's our namespace, app1. And there is the name, Shiny jobs. And there we have all of our methods that we can see. Cancel, I showed kind of the register or run all earlier. Where the heck is that guy? Run all is in there somewhere. Unfortunately, some of these source generated classes are quite ugly looking. They're very robotic, obviously, but there's our run all. And if I go over to our, back to our main page here. So all these Shiny host resolves, which I know are ugly, I can now replace technically with Shiny jobs. Run all. I'll give it the cancellation token of none. False. And this is going to run the exact same code as my Shiny host resolve down here. So again, this is for people that like the static classes. It still does lend itself to dependency injection behind the scenes. So you still get all that testing, but if this is really how you like to work in your code, this isn't a bad option to have. Generally, I do tell people use a library like Prism or something that supports kind of view model dependency injection, and that way you can inject right into your view models stuff like iJob, the iJob manager, or the iNotification manager. But the Shiny host is here, or these static classes are here as you need them. Any questions before I go back to the last of my slides? All right. Let's get this going. So kind of talk really quickly about the roadmap for Shiny because I've still got lots of plans, lots of stuff I want to write for it. I am working with the Maui/Xamarin Forms team on kind of their hosting model and what they're going to do there. I will be plugging into that with the release of Maui. I am looking at stuff like WASM, WebAssembly, via Blazor, Uno. I'm hoping I can make something abstract so I don't need to worry about if it's Blazor or if it's Uno. So that's something I'm working on. I did speak to kind of UWP. I don't know what the future of Windows development is, if this WinUI 3 is going to hold up, and what Project Reunion looks like. To me, it looks like UWP right now, but I don't know. So I will evolve the Shiny model when that picture becomes available or known. So kind of the next big thing for Shiny that I've started working on is actually not so much not focusing on the device-centric services, but focusing more on actual business end use cases. So I'm calling this app services. And what app services are doing is bringing together kind of best practices between all of these things that Shiny does to make solve real world scenarios. So some of the cool things I'm working on right now is a trip tracker. So what this is GPS, like a real-time GPS plus motion activity. And what you can do with this is it can track things like how far you ran, how long you ran for, your average speed. You can use it for stuff like driving. Say if you've got a business, so I'm a contractor in Canada, so I need to track my drives anywhere I go for business expenses. This is a great little module to have, and I'm going to show this off in the very near future. And the API for it is, I think, really slick. It's very easy to use. So that's something I'm working on. I'm also working on a geo dispatch module. So this is like a push notification plus GPS. So a lot of systems, what I see is they generally tend to have GPS running kind of hot all the time and pushing this to the server all the time. So as your user's moving, you're tracking them. So think like a fleet tracking app. They're constantly tracking the user. The problem with that is not only are you killing the battery with your GPS, you're also killing it with all the network calls that you're making. So geo-dispatching, what the idea here is that you send a dispatch notification that's got the coordinates of where an incident is happening and kind of the radius that it's looking for, a max radius of where you can be in a fence to say, hey, can you respond to this incident? And what that'll do is it'll say, here's the incident, here's the lat long, here's the radius, and the geo-dispatch with the push notification will say, am I in this radius? Yes, I am. Display a notification for the user to accept and reject. If they accept it, we send back to the server. If they reject it, we just throw out the notification. So it's really a nice merger of the two modules from Shiny to get all this running. And the last thing I'm doing kind of as an app service is OBD communications. So if you have a vehicle, we all have these diagnostic plugs that can plug into it. So what I'm doing is there's a lot of hardcore BLE stuff that happens with those dongles, and there's a lot of processing that happens. So I've made like a nice library that prevents you from being able to overwhelm the dongle, and also track all of the services like how fast is my car going, what's the error codes coming off the engine, etc. This will all be rolled into one nice little package, and the work to work with that dongle will be almost nothing. So at this point, here's some links for you to go look at. Some of the documentation, some of the samples for Shiny, my blog. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or GitHub if you've got an issue. At this point, I'm open to questions. Fire away.
All right, let's see what we have there. With the Bluetooth module, would it be possible to connect an iOS and an Android device so they can share data?
Yep, Shiny does have a BLE hosting library. You can share data. A lot of people tend to seem to want to share a lot of data through BLE. BLE was not designed for mass amounts of data. It was designed for like 20 bytes of data. So you want to send more flags than like strings. So bytes, ints, maybe your occasional large int, but you don't want to send, huge wads of data. Very small focus messages.
All right. Then there was another question, where to learn more about Shiny, but I guess that's answered right there on the screen.
Yep. The documentation is something I'm working heavily on. There's still lots of work to do there, but it is open source. I'm always looking for help if anybody's got it. Yeah, I just keep evolving it as I can.
All right. I don't see anything else, so I'll bring up my screen. As you can see, GitHub seems to be a place where Allan hangs out a lot, if I look at his graph. He's available for hire, so if you need help with all those things, you can contact him. And I also found that he has a special appreciation button right here. So if you want to thank him for all the nights that you were able to sleep well because his libraries are awesome and helping you out, or maybe you want to convince your boss to press that button, feel free to do so. Other than that, I think Allan already said how to get in contact with him. So thanks, Allan. I really loved the presentation. A lot of things I learned.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. So if anyone wants to win the JetBrains IDE, you can go there now. Only thing you have to do is write me an email to this email address and tell me that you want the license, and the first one that comes through, I'll send this free license to you. Other than that, I just wanted to highlight that we are having the XAM Expert Day on October 1st. And this will be the last time probably that you will hear from Maddie Leger with her current last name. So maybe you want to come here. She's our first official speaker, and she's gonna go get married, I think, right after her talk and change her last name. So yeah, feel free to come to our event on October 1st. It's fully online because we still don't know what the regulations will be at that day. And we hope that it will be up for in-person event next year again. That's everything I have to say. Allan, it was a pleasure having you. You have anything else to say to the audience?
Nope. Thanks for coming out. I appreciate it. Feel free to send any questions on Twitter or such after. Hopefully find no bugs. If you find bugs, file them on GitHub.
All right. So thank you, everyone. It was great seeing you online, and I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Hope to see you next time. Thanks, Allan.
Thank you.